Pepperdine has hired a new head coach. Yes, Washington State has hired a new head coach, and I will kind of recap that a little bit, considering they both happened right after I released the last episode. But I've got to start with, there is a connection here, and I will get to the WCC connection, that the biggest job in all of college basketball was vacated and filled all within a few days, and that is the Kentucky job, which was filled by John Calipari, who has left for Arkansas, has now been filled by a familiar name for many, and really every WCC fan should be familiar with. It's not Dan Hurley, who turned it down. It's not Nate Oates, who said pass. It's not Scott Drew, who also said God called for him to be in Waco. No, it was someone who used to coach in the conference. Maybe the least expected of the names to actually get this job. The new head coach at Kentucky for the Wildcats is none other than now former BYU head coach Mark Pope. And this is the wildest coaching carousel, the wildest just up and down coaching selection I can remember in a long time, because this all happened so fast. This all had so many different names attached to it because it's the Kentucky job. And regardless of what anyone says, is obviously like that is the bluest of blood teams in college basketball. They have the pedigree, they have the budget, they have everything that you would want from a program. But I mean, it does. But as we've seen in the last few days, we've seen coaches say, I'm good where I am. I don't need to go anywhere. I have everything I could need right where I am. And almost every last one of these made sense of why it was a no. I mean, we've seen it over the last few years of just how more or less Big Blue Nation has chased John Calipari out and almost forced him into the arms of Arkansas. Dan Hurley's coming off back-to-back national championships, maybe one of the best runs we've ever seen from a single program. Why would he go anywhere? Scott Drew built the Baylor program. He won a national championship just a few years ago against Gonzaga. He has built that thing up from the ground up and can do no wrong. He will never have to buy another meal in Waco ever again. Why would he go anywhere? Nate Oates is still building that Alabama program, but that he has made Alabama basketball relevant. And being in the same conference as Kentucky, being as successful as he has been, he got that team to the Final Four this year. Why would you go anywhere? Because you know you have all the resources you could want at Alabama. Why would you go anywhere? Then there was a talk of Billy Donovan, who's still obviously coaching for the Bulls. Then I threw out what would have been the craziest of ones, which would have been Rick Pitino. Chris Beard could have been an option. There were a lot of high-profile, maybe edgier names before you ever get to Mark Pope. And it's not like that I'm saying that Mark Pope is a bad option, because Mark Pope is a good coach. Let's not get that twisted in any sort of way. He may be the right option there. My critique about that hire is going to be whether or not Kentucky, that fan base, that administration is going to have the patience to wait, the patience to say this may take a few years before this is going to get going. The other thing is, again, and it's fair to critique this, is that Mark Pope, I think, again, has done really well. He's been to the NCAA tournament. I believe it's 3 or 4 times in his tenure, both as the BYU head coach and then also Utah Valley. but he hasn't won a tournament game. Didn't win one at BYU. He did not win one this past year. In the first year in the Big 12, they were 23-11 this year, 10-8. They were tied for fifth in the Big 12. Got a 6th seed, and we kind of talked about that 5-6 seed flip flop that they had with Gonzaga. They lost to Duquesne, but also again they finished 5th in the Big 12 after finishing 5th in back-to-back years in the WCC. So this is I am fascinated. I'm fascinated to see what this all turns into for Kentucky, for Mark Pope, and then for where BYU goes from there. And the Kentucky situation with Mark Pope does have value going into next year for one particular WCC team, because as of right now, Gonzaga is slated to play Kentucky in Seattle this coming season. Now, new head coach, not the same head coach that signed the deal and whatnot, and obviously there was a lot of talk that, oh, how long will Calipari actually be at Kentucky through the course of this deal? Will he ever actually play in the kennel? And it turns out he may not ever have to play in the kennel after all, because he bounced for Arkansas, because that game at the kennel between Kentucky and the Zags was going to be the final year of that 6-year deal. We're only into year 3 going into this coming season. And so Mark Pope will likely have to see the Zags again. He did not fare well against the Zags really at all in his tenure at BYU. 1-8 against them in the period that they were still in the WCC. So a wild start to the college basketball offseason.